Section 4 of A Book of Nonsense by Edward Lear. There was an old person of Dutton, whose head was as small as a button. So to make it look big, he purchased a wig, and rapidly rushed about Dutton. There was an old man who said, "Hush! I perceive a young bird in this bush." When they said, "Is it small?" he replied, "Not at all. It is 4 times as big as the bush." There was a young lady of Russia who screamed so that no one could hush her. Her screams were extreme. No one heard such a scream as was screamed by that lady of Russia. There was a young lady of Tyre who swept the loud chords of a lyre. At the sound of each sweep she enraptured the deep, and enchanted the city of Tyre. There was an old person of Bangor whose face was distorted with anger. He tore off his boots and subsisted on roots, that irascible person of Bangor. There was an old man of the East who gave all his children a feast, but they all ate so much, and their conduct was such, that it killed that old man of the East. There was an old man of the coast who placidly sat on a post, but when it was cold he relinquished his hold, and called for some hot buttered toast. There was an old man of Kamschatka who possessed a remarkably fat cur. His gait and his waddle were held as a model to all the fat dogs in Kamschatka. There was an old person of Gretna who rushed down the crater at Etna. When they said, "Is it hot?" he replied, "No, it's not," that mendacious old person of Gretna. There was an old man with a beard who sat on a horse when he reared, but they said, "Never mind, you will fall off behind, you propitious old man with a beard." There was an old man of Berlin whose form was uncommonly thin, till he once by mistake was mixed up in a cake, so they baked that old man of Berlin. There was an old man of the West who never could get any rest, so they set him to spin on his nose and his chin, which cured that old man of the West. There was an old person of Cheadle who was put in the stocks by the beadle, for stealing some pigs, some coats, and some wigs, that horrible person of Cheadle. There was an old person of Annerly whose conduct was strange and unmannerly. He rushed down the Strand with a pig in each hand, but returned in the evening to Annerly. There was a young lady of Wales who caught a large fish without scales. When she lifted her hook, she exclaimed, "Only look!" that ecstatic young lady of Wales. There was a young lady of Welling whose praise all the world was a-telling. She played on the harp, and caught several carp, that accomplished young lady of Welling. There was an old person of Tartary who divided his jugular artery, but he screeched to his wife, and she said, "Oh, my life, your death will be felt by all Tartary." There was an old man of Whitehaven who danced a quadrille with a raven, but they said, "It's absurd to encourage this bird," so they smashed that old man of Whitehaven. There was a young lady of Sweden who went by the slow train to Weedon. When they cried, "Weedon Station," she made no observation, but thought she should go back to Sweden. There was an old person of Chester whom several small children did pester. They threw some large stones, which broke most of his bones, and displeased that old person of Chester. There was an old man of the Cape who possessed a large Barbary ape, till the ape one dark night set the house all alight, which burned that old man of the Cape. There was an old person of Burton whose answers were rather uncertain. When they said, "How d'ye do?" he replied, "Who are you?" That distressing old person of Burton.